Welcome back, venturers. It's time for another discussion about VNs. I am Emar, and together with Taurus, we invite our listeners for a quick trip into the dark forest. It's Halloween special. We'll talk about all things spooky and scary lurking in the darkness. Taurus, what monster hides under your bed?
Mm-hmm. You all may think that Halloween is done with, but nope. Just like how monsters scare you at the worst possible moment, here they are to make a return just when you thought you were safe. So here we are talking about some monstrous creatures in visual novels. I do want to make a quick little disclaimer that we're not going to be talking about the sexy anime kind of monsters. Although I'm sure there are many fans of those kinds, this is about the spooky, scary monsters, the kind that will make your blood boil and the hairs in the back of your neck stand up in fright.
Yeah,
So,
as much
mhm.
it took a lot of restraint from me to not find a title with a monster girl of some kinds or a vampire of sorts. So no, for today we focus on the scary and psychological aspect of those monsters.
Yes, we are keeping the Halloween spirit going here. And one title that very much encompasses that is The Letter. In original English language VN, one with extremely high production values, telling the story of a group of friends and strangers who find themselves in the midst of being hunted by a strange ghostly monster. It's very much the vibe of a movie, specifically those horror movies of a group of people being pursued by this destructive force. And I remember the developers mentioning that they wanted to go with the premise of what would it be like to have a haunted house story, but there was no haunted house. The ghost could simply follow you all around the world. Nowhere was safe. At any moment, you might have the lights go out or the door locks behind you, and there she is, this evil spirit who's going to kill you. Ooh. And that sort of vibe carried across very well in The Letter. It has very high production values. The art style is very smooth, and so whenever you have this, hideous, scary, blood-curdling monster out there, it comes across in a very stark manner. And that fear that she could appear at any time, even on these normal, happy days, and these bright backgrounds could suddenly get all dark and twisted, was a big reason for how scary this visual novel was.
Oh, okay. So let me get this straight because I need to untangle the inspiration. Because
Oh,
the inspiration is from the typical horror movie in which a group of a person is trapped inside a haunted something or a mansion or house or whatever. And you're telling me in this VN it's more about that supernatural force is in pursuit of the character.
mm-hmm. You
Okay.
mentioned
Huh.
trapped. And in a sense, when you're trapped in a mansion, it's very clear that nowhere in this mansion you're safe. And that's kind of the goal, is to escape, to make your way to freedom. And in The
Yeah.
Letter, it's a very interesting perspective on it, where what if you can't ever escape? What if no matter
Oh.
where you go, there is always that threat? It doesn't matter if you're in your house, it doesn't matter if you're in your car, it doesn't matter if you're even in a church. Nowhere is safe and sacred from the evil ghost out to kill you all. hmm
Damn.
One other thing I really liked about it is that each chapter had a different character as the main character, so you followed their perspectives as the story advanced. You would bounce from one character to the next, to the next, to the next, and as such, because there are multiple choices in this VN, your decisions might lead the story down a different path, and it may result in your character there getting killed by this evil ghost. And so, the next chapter, it would continue accordingly, whether your character has survived to still take part in the events of the story or if they're gone. And so you quickly realize that there's this fear inside of you as well, that your choices may very well result in you dying at a certain point. And it's up to you to keep your current character alive, and if you fail, ooh, that's another tally mark in the death column. Oh no.
Ah. I mean, that's definitely more engaging when you have a cast of characters. By your choices, they could survive and or meet a tragic fate. But the game doesn't end here and doesn't say, "Oh, okay, you died, so let's go back." No, you move onward with the consequences.
The first two chapters could result in some wildly different plot divergences too. And that was really interesting, but then I think the developers realized that if you have multiple chapters after that and you have to keep all of those separate plot lines going in their own distinct storylines, that exponentially boosts their workload, and they kind of abandoned that pretty quickly. And I'm sad because that's what I like about multiple choice visual novels, is how you can see your choices affecting the story, and even just the tiniest choice could lead to unforeseen consequences and just, that butterfly effect of new plot elements. That's what it was like in the beginning, but then later on, the plot divergences greatly got constricted. And yes, the characters' lives were still at stake, but by the end of it, it started feeling more like just a linear story with bad endings instead of a multiple route mystery.
Because that was the next question of mine, is to which extent your choices mattered, and by the looks of it, what you just described, the early choices had way more impact than the latter ones, just because of the scope and how they couldn't account for all the possible variants if all the choices were on the same weight. And it sucks. That's definitely true. Although I understand that this is unfeasible to give it numbers. If you have 5 characters in a group, to account for all possible permutation of whether or not someone survived and or not in such a group.
And more than that too, of where the plot takes those characters, even if they survive.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Again, you get 5 characters deep, and you're like, okay, well, how was the 5th chapter supposed to account for everything so far? And it's like, okay, well, fine, I understand. But still, none of that really takes away from still how scary the letter is. It has great visuals, so that monster appearing is always very frightful. They know how to use their music and animations well, too. They laid out a very nice atmosphere. And some of the endings get very gruesome. And it's like they put that fear in you early and regularly of what happens if you fall to this ghost's wrath. Ooh, very spooky.
I'm trying in my head to wrap around logically the progress of such a story, even though obviously that kind of setting and characters behave more emotionally than logically. The fact that you have no safe haven changes dynamic quite a lot, because there is no longer an escape from a place to get safe, and or there isn't the inverse of that, right? So you cannot say, okay, now I'm ready, let's venture into what I know to be dangerous, because there's no separation. It follows you everywhere.
Well, I see what you mean. On the other hand, there still are some points where they're venturing into danger and they're risking it all to try and find a solution.
Okay.
But yes. But yes, generally you have the right idea that it does change up the dynamic, and in my opinion, it does ratchet up that tension. So all in all, the letter is a great, very spooky story about a very dangerous monster on the prowl.
And a one you would recommend our readers to read for the Halloween spirit.
Very much a Halloween spirit. Yes. But what about you, MR? What
No,
Halloween vibes are you bringing to the table?
well, I've mentioned it before, and I would be remiss of not bringing it again, especially after you brought out Letter. So I brought Saint Maker. It's from the same developers as the Letter, from Yang Yang Mobile, and the title Saint Maker is a short horror visual novel about a young girl sent to a religious recollection in an abandoned church. Throughout that ordeal, she butts heads against the head nun of the Covenant, but things take a turn to horrific when that night, the main protagonist sees all kinds of different spooks and scares, from broken and or animated statues to very unnerving whispers in a form of prayers? Question mark. This is a very visual visual novel in which the horror is, how can I say it, presented very overtly in a dream-like sequences, and it builds up on the reader that unnervedness, anticipation. Is it real? Is it a dream? Is it something in between? And what is truly happening? I would liken it a little bit to how Fate has a day-night cycle. This title also has the day cycle that is a peaceful day in an abandoned church that is in desperate need of some repairs. Nothing really bad happening. The flowers are blooming, everything looks nice. But then the sun sets, the rooms darken, and the whispers start happening. It's like, huh? What is happening? What is going on? Is it dream? Is it not? Is it some illusions? Huh. It's very unnerving, I'll have to say.
Oh, atmosphere goes a long way in setting up emotions. And
Exactly.
obviously, there's the scary parts that are meant to be scary, but it's how you set it up. It's how you set the stage. It's how you tease the reader into feeling like things are about to go wrong any second now, but not now, but any second now it's gonna happen.
Dokładnie.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like, huh? Is it safe to go to sleep? Do you don't want the day to end? Like, the spooks are waiting. Unlike, or in contrast to the letter, this is a very place-specific horror because you feel like the place is dangerous, something is happening here and now, and whenever character has enough, the immediate thought and rebellious attitude is let's get out of here. And obviously, the head nun of that church that is responsible for your recollection says, no, you can't leave now. You have to stay, you have to finish what you've been here for, and I won't let you leave before that passes. And there is a disconnect because, wait, you understand as a reader, and you feel that character in the story also understand that this place is spooky and you want to distance yourself, but you have an obstacle that seems unfazed by what seems to be incoherent ramblings, and stands in no, just stop panicking, just stay here. And it's very interesting. You are kept at the edge of your seat. What's the reason of all of that? Who's to blame? Is this place somehow cursed? Is there something underneath all of that? Are those statues and whatever happens real or only in your imagination? Maybe something in between? I felt like the atmosphere of the place really nails the, how can I say it, the vibe of something abandoned on the verge of supernatural. And you are never quite sure whether or not it's true, or maybe it's not.
Those psychological aspects, yes. to the point where you can't even trust your eyes if what you're seeing is real or not.
Exactly. And I feel like this VN likes to play a trick on you by showing you a couple of examples of things that are completely and 100% in your head. So you can question even the visual spectacle of those books. Because you are confronted. Yes, those are things you see in those pictures. And this is completely on your head because you have a companion, a second character that also is on the recollection. And she doesn't see all that blood and whatever is splattered on the picture. It's all in your head. It's like, wait, is it all in me? Huh. You keep thinking and doubting yourself.
I also like that you mentioned that you have this head nun who is also very antagonistic to you. And so you always get that comparisons of having the evil monster that's the very otherworldly threat, and then you have the very human threat who is ruining your life too.
Yes, but she does so in a very logical way. She doesn't see any spooks. She doesn't find anything dangerous. So from her perspective, it's some incoherent rambling of a troubled child.
Oh dear. The crushing perception of other people on you.
Yeah, and it adds to the... I wouldn't quite call it schizophrenia, but that dissonance of whether or not it is really all in your head. Do they have a point? Should you, in a way, chill out? I mean, it's like, what's going on? Oh, then obviously I'm skirting around any and all possible spoilers, but the setup and the hook is very nicely done because it questions both you, the reader, and the main character, whether or not it's all in her head, and or maybe there are some hints from you reading the narration and or observing the surroundings.
Very nice. Sounds good. So you liked it and you'd recommend it?
Yeah, hell yeah. For all those that want to be spooked during the Halloween season, have a blast. Go visit your nearest abandoned church in a visual novel form.
Very cool, very cool.
So what example did you bring to counter that?
Yeah, I don't just have one, I have more, but in this case, we're taking the fight to it. I'm talking about a visual novel called The Falconer's Moonlight. This is also a very spooky monster story, but in a different vibe. The main character is a falconer. It takes place in a, somewhat fantasy version of new settlements in New Zealand that are very similar aesthetic to the Wild West of Americas. But they are nearby a jungle, the vast untamed wilderness, and there is some scary, incredible, threatening monster called a Kuller. A strange native monster. It looks like a giant, like those big Charis monsters in Skyrim, if anyone's aware. Like those black armored insect things with the long, jagged pincers and spiky arms like a praying mantis. They're super scary. I always hated seeing them in Skyrim.
Okay.
But there's a monstrous one on the loose, and the main character is there to investigate and to eliminate this strange monster. And to make matters worse, one of the people in this new town is a mole for the creatures on their side, and she has to determine who she can trust and who is on the enemy side here in this suspicious town full of interesting individuals. I mentioned before, but this is more of a mystery and an action bent instead of horror. To be clear, there are many scary parts when you have this murderous death machine insect out in the lands that could strike at any time. And we do see some pretty violent and gory material here, as we see just what we're facing up against. But there are action scenes as, the main character uses her 2 handguns to take out the threats. And there's also the whole mystery aspect of trying to figure out who in this town is going to be the first to slip up. What leads you can follow to investigate for more information about some of these missing people, and who knows stuff that they're not supposed to, and who has grudges that they're willing to take out on the others. So there's that vague supernatural aspect, but it also blends it well into the typical detectiving parts. And because there's the mystery involved, combined with the high-octane action, it makes for some good pacing, too.
Interesting. I mean, the moment you brought up the idea of detective work, right? So you have a setting in which some of those creatures, monsters, infiltrated the village and the people. Okay, that reminds me of an anime called Shiki or an anime called Parasite, because those two had a similar idea of the monster lives among humans, and you are seeing the story unfolding from the perspective of a task force that tries to cleanse the city or I think it was in one of the animes, it was in a village from those monsters. So it was very detectivistic at the start, in which you tried to investigate or uncover who can you trust and who is the impostor, so to say. But on the other hand, it is more of on the combative side. So what you mentioned also is the main premise is, yes, you are able to, once you narrow down where's the monster and who to trust, fight them on equal grounds, or more or less on equal grounds. So it has that duality to it. Not necessarily in a day-night cycle, but more on the detective side and extermination force side.
So not only do you have to be concerned about the threats from outside in the strange, unknown, unmapped wilderness, but you also have to watch out from threats from the inside, of just who you can't fully trust anyone you meet, and you have to always watch what you say and who you say it to. The VN had a lot of potential. I mean, it does have a lot of potential, and it was very good on several marks. There were some problems with it. I feel like the second half of the VN went too hard into the action, and we lost a lot of the murder mystery aspects that made it, so, I guess you could say, so varied, so rich. And it got a little one note.
To be honest, that's always the danger when it comes to setup of the story, that is battle of wits. If you uncover too much, and if you solve the battle of wits of two characters or two organizations outwitting each other, then it boils down to its battle.
Yeah, but you have that battle at like the end, the climax or conclusion, right?
Yeah, I mean, depends, right? If you burn out too quickly, then all that's left is battle and
exactly.
Pew, pew, pew.
Exactly. If you start, veering off that course too early, now it's like, okay, well, is this a Battle of Wits VN anymore? If you can only really say that about the first half. If anything, the Battle of Wits parts should err too much, and you should go for too long in the story out of anything, because then at least you can keep the bombastic conclusion and end on that note. And it's like, okay, that's acceptable. Whereas if you err too short and you end up ending this confrontation and all your cards are out on the table halfway through, then it's like, okay, you have an entire so many more hours of content to go through that's going to be the, I guess you could say the action, the resolution, trying to end the chase. And I don't really think that works out too well.
I'm going to use a very weird comparison to what you just said about the detective work of trying to figure out what is happening, and a confrontation side of let's confront what is happening to the best of our understanding. I feel that flip-flop was very apparent in Fate Hollow Heaven's Feel. Especially, it kept you grounded up until the very, very, very last moment that you had a confrontations you maybe even not accounted for. And that kind of can I trust that character kept you on your toes up until the very last moment.
Okay, I see where you're coming from. I don't know if I fully agree, but I see what you're saying.
Without going into details, I personally was very pleasantly surprised with the final confrontation that was in that title. I was like, wait, that thematically makes a lot of sense. And it also showcases that duality of, yeah, first you had to understand who are you fighting with and what is the true enemy. But if you did not account for that one variable, you will be caught out of guard completely.
But anyways, back to the Falconers, Moonlight. The horror aspect is still very scary. These big monsters are real unnerving to me. I don't know what it is about those kinds of multi-legged insects like that, but oh man, seeing them just makes something rumble deep inside me, and it's like, oh geez, get me out of here. Especially when you see all of the decay and destruction they are bringing along. This VN does a good job making you fear them. Not only because of that, of what happens in the story, but because they have some animation kind of stuff going on in the scenes. They have, it's very fluid where the camera will bounce around and certain elements of a CG will like whoosh and slide across the screen. It makes it feel a lot more dynamic. I really like that in this title.
Oh.
It really makes, it enhances the emotions, the fear, the ferocity of these creatures. Bum bum bum.
Okay. It's always, how can I say, appreciated when they try to tie in animations with the feeling they want to convey. And as you say, they try to do justice those creatures that just skitter around like an insect and unnerve you so.
So that absolutely filled me with Halloween spirit back when I read this VN.
Oh,
So what about you, MR? What do you have to cap things off?
I left a title to destroy potential people's sleeping schedule for last. It's Love Unlimited. Okay. And first, to recap, what is Love Unlimited? Love Unlimited is a second chapter of a story shown in the original Love, sometimes referred to as Love Extra, sometimes as just Love. Is the second side to it. And this is a isekai style of a setting in which the main protagonist got placed in an unfamiliar place, but with a familiar cast of characters, maybe more like to alternative history than isekai. But the method of switching words was very mysterious and isekai-ish in nature. In this now hostile environment, this is far away from slice of life. It's definitely on the verge of extinction event. I wouldn't yet say post-apocalyptic, but the doom is fast approaching. And throughout the entire ordeal, now you are in a military school, learning to pilot the machines to combat the enemy. And this is important, because throughout this particular title, Love Unlimited, the monsters and the alien creatures that they keep on talking about are never shown. And I felt like that's very interesting, because I think the entire story of Love Unlimited was around 40 hours. But anyway, it's very lengthy. And throughout the entire length, you're never shown the monster directly, ever. The best you could get is some vague silhouette. And that's it. Everything else is in your head. Both in your head as a reader and in your head as that main protagonist, Takeru. And what is the best example to show it? That during one of the practice sessions in which he was piloting mecha, he suddenly just imagined what it would be to face off the alien in his head. He has that, I would say, kind of traumatic vision of what it would be to fight to the death with a creature and or life form you cannot understand and cannot comprehend power of. And that makes for a very intensive scene that stuck with me for a long time.
I remember some people happened to complain about Muv-Luv Unlimited in the sense that these aliens, the beta, are supposed to be the big scary monsters that humanity is at war with, and yet we never see them. So it really makes them an out-of-focus villain who you can't ever really take seriously. You know, that's one criticism of it. But like you said, on the other hand, it makes them a truly alien enemy. You don't know what they look like, you don't know what they're capable of. You're trying to, of course, but they are very much an enemy that is always outside of your understanding. And that goes a long way in making them so scary from Takeru's point of view.
Yeah, I have to address one point in that criticism. The fact they are never shown in the title, I don't feel that's a negative per se, right? It's the fact that they aren't, they don't do anything or they aren't shown in any event. I feel like the one, how can I say it the best? Suspense of disbelief you have to accept is that despite the military equipment and despite the amount of footage they have, they never show it to protagonist for some reason, or they never show it to the player. That's the one thing you have to accept, because that kind of doesn't make sense. Like, you're learning about weaknesses of such creatures, show them for the class.
Yeah,
But from the horror standpoint and from the psychological, how can I say it? From the psychological machinations they try to invoke and your responses, like it works, I would say. But like I said, and it's funny how it fuels the tensions, right? Like all those countries failing, the enemies overtaking the territory, and is propagating, especially in Eurasia. Okay, because this is such a serious threat. It's not to be taken lightly. It's not a villain of the week or some sort of jobber that appears defeated and go on. No, it's super serious. It's far away on the front. Let's prepare. But it's just so weird that even in the footage that you're shown, it's not fully visible.
Very cool. Yeah, some people, consider it a criticism. Some people don't. But yes, it does very much lead to some very spooky, scary vibes.
Yeah, and you can sympathize with the protagonist who just hears so much bad about those brutal creatures, aliens from another world, that he envisioned what it would be. He, as a person who stems from a very peaceful world, thrust into this hostile environment, and now is faced with an enemy that is unsurmountable. And his psyche snaps. Like, I felt like that's very human. That's very scary to see. And you can easily see yourself in his position. Like, damn, if I were in that position, heading to a front, I definitely would understand that 15 seconds is the average time of pilot's composure. Was that something like that? The statistic was important.
Mm-hmm. Very scary, very scary. Well, that is a fantastic note to end on our belated Halloween episode, striking at you when you least expect it. Thank you all very much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed reviewing some of visual novels' monstrous side of the scary emotions they can bring.
Yeah, thanks to our listeners, and well, I wish you all pleasant reads and venture out.
Venture out.